Hello and welcome to this tutorial, and in this tutorial we'll be learning about animations and transitions. So basically in this tutorial we are going to learn how you could animate your widgets which you are going to add on your layout. So basically we'll be learning some simple transitions and animations so as to understand how the animation works and how you could add animations and transitions to your application. So for the sake of this tutorial we'll be creating a new Android project. So we simply select a new Android Studio project and let's say we name this application as animation app. Then we click next, and in this case we are going to choose the API level 21. So click next, select a blank activity and let the name of this activity be main activity, and finally click finish. So once your project is set up, the next thing which you do is that we delete this text view right here. So once the text view is deleted, the next thing which we do is that we give an ID to this layout. So this layout right here which we are using is the relative layout. So we simply select it, go to properties and give this an ID. So let's say we call it as my layout. Now once we have the ID to this layout, the next thing which we do is that we drag a small button right over here. So let's say we drag it onto the top left corner of our screen. And now in this tutorial we'll be adding some transitions or animations to this screen right here. So basically what we are going to do is that whenever we select this button right here, or whenever we click this button right here, the button is going to move down over here. So that's the basic transition which we are going to add to this button. So now the next thing which we do is that we give an ID to this button. So we simply select it, go to properties, and here instead of just button we name it as my button. So once we have the IDs to the layout as well as button, the next thing which we do is that we go ahead and add some transitions to it. So in order to add some transitions or animations, we have to go into this main activity.java file, and basically again as we do in each and every tutorial, we clean up the code. So we delete the toolbar which is by default added by Android Studio. Now once this is done, the next thing which we do is that we go inside this main activity right here, and then we create the layout. So we type view group and let's name this layout as my layout. And once this is done, we need to have a reference to this layout. So we go inside on create right over here and we get the reference to our layout. So we type my layout equals, and we typecast it to view group. So we type view group, and then finally we get the reference by using the find view by ID. So we type find view by ID and we type r.id, and our layout name is my layout. So we get the reference to it. And now once we have the reference to it, the next thing which we do is that as we want to add a transition to it, so basically what we are trying to achieve here is that when we click the screen right here, the button is going to move to the bottom side of the layout. So we are going to add an on touch listener to this layout screen right here. So in order to add an on touch listener, we initially type in the layout name. So we type my layout dot set on touch listener, and within these we are going to specify what happens when we touch the layout. So inside it we type in new, and as the layout is a relative layout, we type new relative layout dot on touch listener, and within this we are going to type in the on touch method. So we type public boolean on touch, and then we are going to pass in two parameters. First parameter is going to be the view, and the next parameter is going to be the motion event. So we type motion event and let's name it as event. Now within this thing right here, we are going to go ahead and we are going to add the actual code which we want to execute when we touch the layout. So the thing is that instead of adding the code right here, what we are going to do is that we are going to add a method name to it, and then we are going to declare the method outside this. So let's say we name the method as move button. So we type in move button here, and we are going to define it outside this. Now the final thing which we'll need to do is that as this is a boolean, we need to return some value. So we type return true. So once we are done with this, we create this method move button. But before creating the move button method, I think we have an error, and that is because we have typed this in capital, so this should be on touch with the T capital. Now once this is done, we move out of this and we create the method which we have called over here. So we type public and void, as this is not going to return us anything. Then we type in the method name, which is move button, and then we define the code inside this method. So the first thing which we'll need to do is that we'll need to have the reference to the button. So we type view my button equals find view by id. Then we are going to type in r.id, and the reference to this button is my button. So we type my button, and when we get the reference to this button, the next thing which we need to do is that we need to add a rule to the relative layout. So in order to do that, we type in relative layout dot layout params, and this is basically used in order to set the parameters of the layout. So this is a bit lengthy code and you might get confused here, but basically what we are trying to do here is that we are going to try and give some rules to the layout. So then we give a name to this rule. So we type in position rules, then we type equals new relative layout dot layout params, and we are going to specify two parameters within this. So the first parameter is going to be relative layout dot layout params dot wrap content, and the second parameter is going to be the exact same thing. So we type relative layout dot layout params dot wrap content, and this is basically a rule which we have just defined. And the next thing which we need to do is that we need to add the rule. So if you find this code a bit confusing, so the only thing which you need to remember about this piece of code right here is that it is basically a rule which we have named as position rules, and we are going to use this to add some rule to our layout. So we exit out of this declaration, and then we go ahead and add the rule. So we type position rule, then we give a dot operator, and then finally we add a rule. And the rule which we need to add is going to be what we want to do with this layout. So the thing is that we want the button to move to the bottom, so we type relative layout dot align parent bottom, as we want to move it to the bottom. And the next parameter which we are going to use is going to be the relative layout dot true. So we type in relative layout dot true. Now once this is done, the next thing which we need to do is that we need to add this thing or this rule right here to the button. So in order to add it, we first get the reference to button. So we type my button dot, and then we type in set layout params, and finally in the layout params we are going to specify the rule which we have created. So in this case we are going to type in position rules. So basically what this code right here is going to do is that we have the button right here. So this transition or this animation is basically going to drag this button down to the bottom over here. Now let's say we want to add in one more transition. Let's say we want to make the button grow. So let's go ahead here and add one more rule, or we add one more animation or transition to the button. So let's say we type in the comments code for expanding the button, and here we specify the code which we are going to use in order to make the button grow. So in order to do that, we type view group dot layout params, as we want to use the layout params, and then we specify the size rules. So this will be the rules which we will use to increase the size of the button. So we type size rules equals my button dot get layout params, and then we want to mention the width and the height since we want to change them. So we type size rules dot width, and let's say we want to increase it to 450, and let's say the size height we want to increase it to 300. So we type in size rules dot height equals 300, and then finally we are going to set the my button to this particular rule. So we type my button dot set layout params, and then finally we are going to specify the size rules inside of it. So we type size rules. So once this is done, we are done with the animation. So we save the code and then we run this application onto our emulator. So as you could see, our application is up and running onto the emulator, and when we try to touch the layout, as you could see, the button just went down here and the size of the button has increased. But as you could see, there is a problem with this application, and that is it is not showing us a proper animation like the button slides over to here. It is just directly changing the position of the button from top to the bottom, and it is directly growing, and it is not showing the delay. So the next thing which we'll need to do is that we need to add a delay to it. So we exit out of this application, we minimize our emulator, and we make a minor change to our code in order to introduce the delay. So what we do is that we go into this move button right here, and we use the transition manager in order to introduce a delay. So we go right here and we type in transition manager dot begin delay transition, and to this we are going to pass in the layout name. So our layout name is my layout, and now once we are done adding this method to our layout, the next thing which we do is save our code, then run our emulator again, or run our application on the emulator and select the running device. So click OK. So as you could see, our application is now up and running on the emulator, and when we touch the layout, as you could see, the button transitioned from the top to bottom. But in this case there was a delay, and we had a smooth transition as we have added the delay. So that's how you use basic transitions and animations in your application, and you could use any form of transition or animation. So thank you very much for watching this tutorial, and I hope you understood how animations and transitions are added into your application. So thank you very much for watching this tutorial, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Thank you.